Welcome back to America Decides. Evangelicals across the United States are working to bolster their support for former President Donald Trump through Election Day. And this includes the fastest growing group of them, and they're called Charismatic Christians. For more on this, let's bring in Matthew D. Taylor to discuss. He is a senior scholar and the Protestant scholar for the Institute for Islamic, Christian, and Jewish Studies. He's also the author of a soon-to-be-published book, The Violent Take It by Force, the Christian movement that is threatening our democracy. Matthew, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. So we watched Major's piece, which featured you in it, and this group called Charismatic Christians. What exactly does that mean? Where do they get their name? Who are they?
So the term charismatic actually comes from the Bible. It's rooted in a Greek term, charismata, which refers to the gifts or the graces of God. So the Pentecostal movement is one of the first of the charismatic movements in the modern era. So charismatic Christians are Christians who are focused on recapturing what they think is the supernatural or miraculous ethos of early Christianity. These are Christians who want to experience Christianity, who want to experience miracles. So they're marked by things like speaking in tongues, prophecy. They're interested in healing and faith healing. So these are Christians who have a much more visceral connection to Christianity. And in modernity, they're trying to get back to what they think was the vision of the early church.
And, you know, it's interesting covering Trump and talking to a lot of his supporters. A lot of them have mentioned to us as we're reporting that they believe after the assassination attempt that he was saved by God. I actually asked the former president about that a couple weeks ago in our interview. Here's what he had to say.
There has to be a reason, and I do believe in God. I also believe perhaps God had a purpose that he wants to save this country. And I think that may have really been a reason.
And I'm curious from your perspective, how is that dynamic mobilizing voters in this more organized way?
Almost as soon as Donald Trump entered the race in 2015, you started having these charismatic Christians, especially leaders and celebrities in that world, megachurch pastors, televangelists, prophets, gather around Trump and imbue him with a certain spiritual ethos. They saw him as a divinely anointed figure. And there were many prophecies coming from these prophets, these modern day prophets, talking about Trump, talking about God's hand in his life, his destiny. And so in a way that I don't think we've ever seen in American history, there's this religious attachment to a political figure that they actually believe that Donald Trump is anointed by God. And the assassination attempt, for many of them, confirmed that. They see it as a miraculous deliverance, that God was the one who turned Trump's head at the last moment and saved him and spared his life that day. And so for them, it fulfills, in many ways, the prophecies that they believe are already there.
In your book, you talk about the threat that this group could pose to democracy. What do you mean by that?
So let me be clear. I don't think that charismatic Christians as a whole are a threat to American democracy. I grew up evangelical. I grew up even charismatic in many ways. But there are particular sets of leaders and networks of leaders who've embraced very extreme theologies in this world. They believe that God is mandating for them to take over all the different segments of society, to Christianize society according to their vision of Christianity and their interpretation of the Bible. They use phrases like taking dominion, believing that it is their responsibility as Christians to take over. These are some of the same leaders who have gathered around Trump, been many of his evangelical advisors, been many of his chief Christian propagandists. And my worry is that for many of them, their attachment to Trump, it has very little to do with Christianity, with American democracy, and much more to do with fulfilling what they think is God's will.